Okay. All right, shall we start?
Do it.
All right. Um, hello, lovely people, and thank you for joining me and Mark tonight. I've been working with Mark for in the last few months, and I just got really inspired. I was like, this is so important, like to have a bit of a more awareness around health. And Mark is such a health expert, and I love your holistic approach, Mark. You're helping people with achieve well-being and health goals, and you're just full of wisdom. And I think it's really important to share that. So then our lovely Academy people, and I know we have some lovely ladies that are your clients that join us tonight as well. So yeah, I would like to see what you have to share with us tonight.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for the invitation, Anya. So yeah, put together a little bit of information. I absolutely love sharing this information. So just to position it with you, for the start of the presentation, the first, half of it may actually be a little bit triggering. I kind of do that on purpose to kind of just bring up any kind of little bit of anger you might have, and that may help facilitate some change. Okay, so also, if you've got any questions or anything you want to challenge me on or anything at all, feel free to punch them through into the chat, and I'll try and have a look at that throughout the presentation. Anya, you're welcome to stop me if there's a bunch of questions that come through that I've kind of missed. Okay.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you.
So I will open the presentation, my Zoom and PD presentation skills. All right, here we go. Cool. Okay, so your health is your wealth. Both Anya and I are presenting, or Anya may ask me some questions or facilitate. And so the reason we call it this is, I personally think that if your health is not really firing that well, then it's quite difficult to fire in other areas of life. Okay, so it's something that I think is really important and something that you should continue to work on. So I'm still working on my health. Okay, it's a work in progress. I'm always trying new things. I did a post the other day about, I'm trying squeezing lemon juice in water as a deodorant because I don't want any chemicals. That's actually been working out pretty well. Previously, I was using apple cider vinegar for deodorant. That didn't work out so well just in terms of smell. I'm always trying these things. I haven't refined it all. I'm currently doing a deep dive on research on lighting, and that's quite complicated. It's a refinement process. It is a journey. Sometimes you got to try things and they work for you. Sometimes you try things that don't work for you. Okay. It's a continual learning process. Okay. So first of all, I just want to set it up with some statistics. Then we're going to talk about, the mindset of how you can improve your health. Then we're going to go through practical tips. And then a little exercise is owning your value in any kind of area of life you'd like. We're working on health today, but it can be anything. Okay. So statistics. So again, like I said, the first part of the presentation might be slightly triggering, but we will work through solutions as well. So I personally think, as a population, it seems as though we're probably getting sicker if you look at the statistics. Okay, so we're deviating further and further away from nature, even though there seems to be more awareness around health at the moment. And interestingly, the argument around longevity, the US is actually starting to decline in their longevity rates. Okay, so this is something that we need to capture pretty quickly. So I'm just going to go through a few different conditions. So the first one being mental health. So over the last 30 years, different mental illness diagnoses have increased. Okay, so that's anxiety disorders, depression disorders, schizophrenia, emotional eating. They've all increased. And then there may be an argument that, maybe we're more aware of things. That is possible. But these have also increased as well. So in the last 12 months, in the latest statistics, around about 21% of females reach out for professional help on their mental health, compared to 12.9% of males. I think it's fantastic people are reaching out. The interesting thing about this statistic is that males are actually 3 times more likely to take their own life. So, they're reaching out less, but probably taking, dramatic action more. So, this is in some ways, a prompt to males to, hey, look, you can reach out, you don't need to suppress your emotions and feelings around this. My little, cool. Okay. Next one would be autoimmune conditions. So by most metrics, autoimmune conditions are increasing. Okay. Again, there may be some conjecture around diagnosis of autoimmune conditions. We're probably getting better at diagnosing it. So I thought to check an autoimmune condition called type 1 diabetes, where the body essentially doesn't produce much insulin to process food and sugar. So type 1 diabetes has increased by 3 to 4% over the last 3 decades. Okay. So we don't, there's still some conjecture on what causes autoimmune conditions. It's been linked with different genetic triggers. But if you look into the work of Bruce Lipton, who wrote a book called The Biology of Belief, he in there talks about the fact that genes are generally switched on and off through environmental factors and thoughts. Okay. So examples of environmental factors would be things like nutrition or heavy metal toxicity or like an infection or a parasite or something like that. And then there's thoughts. Okay. So there's a number of different thoughts that can lead to autoimmune conditions that I've worked with. I know the Academy helps people with this. So things around suppressed emotion and suppressed thoughts, or not really knowing how to use their emotions and thoughts, can sometimes trigger these kind of conditions. And I've worked with autoimmune conditions and those kind of thought patterns, and in some cases had pretty good results. So, the first two, yeah, sure, maybe a bit of conjecture. The next one, not so much because it's quite visible. Okay. And this is, I've worked with people that are very compliant and still struggle with body shape. I think we've deviated from nature so much that there's still some investigation onto, what might be contributing to obesity or weight gain. But the statistics are pretty clear that it has tripled in the last sort of 40 years. Okay. Now that includes Australia. So Australian obesity rates were about 10% in the 1970s, and now they're around about 30%. And then if you consider overweight people, then the Australian adult population is around about 65% obese or overweight. So, like I said, it's quite complicated. I have great empathy for people that struggle with this, especially that are really compliant. But like I said, it's a journey. You've got to keep trying these things, keep investigating things, see what works and doesn't work. And there's a lot of learning in the process.
Yeah, for sure.
Then finally, cancer. So cancers, the diagnosis of cancer are increasing. In the UK for a certain cohort, it was around about 0.8% per year. As it happens, at the moment, what's being reported is that people are surviving cancer a bit better. And I think that's probably due to a number of factors. Maybe more awareness around holistic health or the nutritional factors, and maybe refinement of the medications as well in the treatment. Okay, cool. So that's just the stats. Okay, so I want to talk about health in a vesica piscis sort of way. So where the polarities at work, that's when movement starts to happen. Okay, so we want to work with the polarities, and today we're going to work with blame and responsibility. Okay, so first of all, blame. So I personally think sometimes in a health transformation, you need to go into blame to at least identify what's happening, identify the root cause, identify what's triggering you. And then it's your choice how long you want to stay in blame or how quickly you want to move to responsibility. So as an example, I was doing a deep dive on something called microplastics about 6 to 12 months ago, going into blame on my, plastic chopping board and my plastic water bottle, and then started changing some things. I now cut on glass and I now use a glass water bottle as an example, right? So, the blame element just kind of allows you to move a little bit if you use it really well. It can be used dysfunctionally and you can get really, really stuck in it. So again, my purpose is to sort of, bump up the anger levels a little bit, and then we'll work on the responsibility side. So one place people like to blame is corporations. Okay. So, it's pretty clear that some corporations don't engage in great activity for the public of the health. And I can give you some examples of that. So corporations, some of them, the processed food companies, actually hire, people to make sure the food is addictive and also not that satisfying. So you don't actually feel completely full. Okay. So they actually kind of do both. And there's some examples of this, and you can look it up. There's many examples of this, but some ones that are pretty well known that I can talk about because ownership's changed hands a few times. So cigarette companies, when it was actually becoming apparent that cigarettes were causing harm by about the mid-80s, they actually started buying processed food companies and running the same playbook, okay, and just making the processed foods more addictive, okay? So a well-known cigarette company called Philip Morris, which owns Marlboro and Benson and Hedges, actually bought Kraft and started changing the products, okay? Another cigarette company in the 80s called R.J. Reynolds, I think their cigarettes are Camel and Pall Mall. They bought a biscuit company which owned Oreo biscuits and made them more addictive, as an example, okay? So, this is just what happens, and you can sit there blaming these corporations, or at some point you can take responsibility and start making some different choices.
Love that.
Then there's government. So some people blame governments. There's sometimes the information on this is not entirely transparent. Probably the UK has the most transparent data on this, and their nutrition advisors, most of them are documented as having conflict of interest with large food companies. Okay, so they're actually got large conflict of interest, and they're actually advising the government on what nutrition to have, but they're actually being financially incentivized. Okay, so in the US, a very prominent doctor called Dr. Robert Redfield, the former head of the CDC, so Center for Disease and Control, came out last week and said that our government agencies have been captured by industry. So this is pretty well known. A little bit difficult to get all the transparent data, but the information is starting to come out. So we can blame corporations, we can blame governments, and then we can also blame family. Okay, so now corporations and governments, that's pretty tangible. You can find data on that. Whereas family, this is a little bit more difficult to identify, okay? So it's very easy to blame family for inheriting or copying patterns of your parents, or blaming, family members for certain eating behaviors, or kind of like, if your family went through divorce or there was grief and that triggered sort of emotional eating, like this is where the blame starts, and that's okay. You're welcome to have that. It's just your choice on how long you want to be there for. Okay.
Yeah.
And then finally, there's friends. Okay. So we can blame friends. I had a conversation with a client only last week, who's turning 50, and she's ready to give up alcohol. But all her friends, like her whole circle is alcohol. So it's a very tricky transition for her. They've been friends for decades. And I'm working with her on that. It's probably going to be a slow transition. But she was like, I could see the anger levels in her, with her friends, were starting to build up. Now, interestingly, she went to a sound healing. She's got a really sore neck. So she went to a sound healing and started coughing profusely. So, we're working with her, trying to express her truth a lot more.
So I find this one, Mark, is very important with the friends, because when we start changing and improving our health, I think it's important to find people that have results that we want, or they're going to the same direction. Yeah. So I find it often, like you said, we can hang out with the people who keep us stuck in the old patterns. So sometimes here we have to be ready and prepared that we're going to have to find new circle of people. Yeah. Because if you are, I believe that we all have different values that glue us together with our friends. And when health becomes your value, and if someone is not valuing health, means they might be in conflict with your values. So then it doesn't go well together anymore. So sometimes that one is a hard one for people, and they want to stay hanging out with the same people. But I think, we have to really consider if we go far away from that, we're not going to be a match anymore often. Because one thing I notice is that, if we make better choices, and if we're just in a conversation, a lot of the times, like I look after my health pretty well, especially physical. I don't drink coffee, I don't drink alcohol, like other things as well. And if I mention to people often, they sort of feel like ashamed because they're not making the same good choices. So often it's like, they start to defend, or like, and so I think sometimes, if you have people that are aligned, you don't have to be thinking that, you're going to trigger someone, because either you can trigger people or you can inspire them. Yeah. But
Yeah, look,
So
it's a tricky one with the friends, and I know a lot of the people dialing in tonight are Academy members, and they've had to probably go through this transition. But I personally think that there's a grief cycle that happens. So it's sad, it's hard. There's a certain loyalty there, and you originally came together because you have very similar patterns, and you can help justify each other's patterns. So
mm,
especially as an example, like alcohol, where people brag about how much they're drinking, you all get together about drinking, you all justify your drinking, and then all of a sudden what generally happens is one of the friends, their either physical health or mental health actually starts to go awry a little bit. And they might show up to some functions and go, hey, look, I'm not drinking anymore. Then everyone the circle starts to get a little bit agitated because all of a sudden their addiction to alcohol is not being justified by their friends. So it's a real tricky one around the friends, and it's extremely common with the addiction aspect. And what I've found with friends is that um, sort of healthy friends tend to meet healthy friends over time, and then unhealthy friends meet unhealthy friends to sort of justify their behaviors. So, yeah, it's a grief cycle. It's not easy, but it can really influence your health as well. Sometimes you may have to make difficult choices in which friends you hang out with.
yeah, love that.
Hey,
Thanks.
Marky, could you get everyone to mute? You can mute them all, but there's just someone's posted in the chat to get people to mute.
Okay, I don't know how to do that.
I can't do it because I'm made you a host. So
You can make Anya co-host or me co-host, and we can organize that.
Okay, cool. Let me do stuff now.
Just make one of us co-hosts.
I just made. There's no option to make co-host. It just says make host.
that's what I didn't have that option either. That's why I made you a host, because there was no co-host.
Okay.
It's a bit of a shame.
Well, but you can just ask, please, guys, if you can just make sure that you're all muted, so then it doesn't make
Yeah.
noise, so then we can only hear Mark and me
Yeah,
talking.
so if you can mute yourself, that'd be awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out how to do it.
Oh,
Cool.
good, Mark. Yeah,
Okay.
that's good.
So, I've sort of, as I was trying to do the mute thing, I've unveiled the two of them. So, one of the responsibilities we can do is money. Okay, so what do we want to spend our money on? Do we want to spend it on things that are destructive or things that will work for us? So that's the first thing. Second thing is, and I've kind of tried to align it with corporations, even though it can be attributable to anything. But as an example, if we stop buying certain products, then we take our power away from that company. Okay, so I use the example of Oreos. If we all stop buying Oreos tomorrow, then that product line actually goes away. Okay, so our money is exceptionally powerful. Where we put it is exceptionally powerful. It's literally what we support. So if we are giving money to large companies, or if we give our money to organic farmers, then we're actually, putting money into good nutrition. Organic farmers will actually help the quality of the soil. There'll be less sprays in the environment. So your money holds actually a lot of power. Not only, where you put your power, but also where you want to spend it for yourself. Then we've got boundaries. Okay, so you've got to have boundaries sometimes with your health. I think it's actually vital. Okay, you've almost got to protect it a little bit. It can always be infiltrated on, and one of the most common ones I actually see is sleep, where people's boundaries around sleep get interrupted. So this is very common for parents, and then, which is fine. I can understand it early on. But then it gets to a point, I've seen some parents where they have to help their kids with their homework every night going into into late high school, sort of grade 10, 11, and 12. And, that can be running a little bit of control as well. So, having good boundaries with your health, like I said, sleep is a vital one that I see. Good boundaries in what you'll say yes to and what you'll say no to, absolutely vital for your health.
Can I just add something here, Mark? I just want to add it in my own way. How I like to explain it is that, how we all talk about inner child, we have inner child. I also see that we have an inner parent, and that's part of us that owns our authority, that makes decisions. So, and I think a lot of our inner parents that we have, inner parent that we have, is not actually knowing how to make the good decisions that you said. Yeah, so it's very important, I think, when we are responsible, that we have that mature inner parent that can make good decisions for ourselves, in a sense that, in a moment, often when we are in conflict with our health, we're going to make a decision of what feels good in a moment. And I think, when we make good decisions, we actually make a decision that what is good for us, not what tastes good, what feels good, what's convenient, but what will be good for and it's a long-term thing. Yeah, we're thinking long-term, not just in the moment. Otherwise, if we're thinking for the moment, we can feel like, oh, I just want to eat that pizza, and I just want to stay up late. So we have to really think, is this good for me, or does it feel good? And otherwise, we're like metaphorically like a parent that allows a child to eat cookies before dinner. It's a bad decision, yeah. And I think we have to really think what sort of a decision making do we have, and that's the boundaries. Can we make good decisions for ourselves? And ask yourselves why not? Like what owns you? What in your inside, which limitation is that makes you then make a decision that feels good yet comes with a negative consequence after.
Yeah, exactly. And often, when there's emotional eating, and I've worked with a lot of people on this, they normally feel good initially and then don't feel great afterwards,
Yeah.
So, it's a tricky one. And anytime I work with someone, I really want them to be honest with me around emotional eating, because sometimes it's just a matter of peeling back the layers.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one would be implementation. Okay. So, there's a lot of, there may be a lot of self-defeating thoughts, self-defeating, lots of emotion clogged up, but the best thing you can do is actually just implement, in my opinion. Okay. So, and that's taking as much responsibility as you can. So you're taking as much of your power back as you can. And that kind of links with the last point around self-awareness. So sometimes you need to have to increase your level of self-awareness to help make the best decisions and to help implement as best as possible. So, as we use the example here of family and friends, where, for example, the friends in the addiction circle, knowing that it's no longer working for you is actually an increase in your self-awareness, then you may go and take action and potentially change friend circles. And that's like the implementation aspect. So in my view, the bounce between blame and responsibility can be vital to improve your health. The blame can help you identify, and then you've got to take the responsibility and make some changes. I've just brought in some key dot points that might help you.
I love that. So one thing I wanted to just add here is that, what I noticed, working with people and, when we talk about health is often that a lot of the times, the reason, like people would say, oh, like, I don't know what to do. They're so stuck in, like, let's say eating the way they're eating and doing what they're doing. And it's how to get off that merry-go-round, So let's say they might not have enough clear picture of what to do. Let's say if they're going to start eating better, what does that look like? That's why, I ask Mark, can you help me work on my macros so I know that I'm feeding my body because I want to tone and build muscle. I'm doing Pilates. So I think a lot of the times we don't know, well, if we are not going to eat bad, or if we're going to, like, what are we going to do instead? Or let's say, I think we need to have a clear picture of how is a healthy version of us going to look like? Because and that comes to boundaries. Once we know what we want to be all about, then we know how to make that happen. And we are going to actually recognize when we're going to violate that, when are we going to push through those boundaries. Because like I said, I think too many people don't have enough rules to follow, to know. Let's say for me, for my health, like when I'm talking about, let's say, physical health, I have exactly clarity around, what physical activities I do, when, how long, what food is a yes, what foods are a no, or what other things are a no. So, and once we have that clear, it's obviously we still have to be responsible to follow through. But a lot of people, I think, don't have enough clarity, so they don't even know where to start, and they're all over the place with the rules. A little bit of yes, a little bit of no, and a lot of the times I see health is like, it's only important when it's convenient. People go, oh, it's Christmas or it's Easter, and then we don't follow through with what we sort of we say that we will. So I think it's really important to know what you want. Help either you find Mark to help you, or whoever that can help you figure out a clear picture of what is a healthy version of you going to look like, and make a plan. How can you make that happen? So that's just something I want to add.
And for what it's worth, I think I've done a bit of work with Anya on health, and she's probably one of the fastest implementers I've seen. So
thank you.
She's really, really quick, and which is fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, so on the aspect of balance and Vesica-Piscis, I thought I'd bring in some practical tips using the yin yang symbols. This is in terms of Chinese philosophy. Okay, so we're going to talk first about the yin side. Okay, so, and I'm going to talk around these 4 doctors. So I've adapted this from an education institute called the Czech Institute, which then adapted it from Hippocrates, which is known as the father of modern medicine. Okay, so we're going to talk about quiet first. Okay, so I personally think you really need to balance these energies. And I'm not saying that you need to spend 12 hours on one side, 12 hours on the other side. It's just about balancing them, okay? And how you can fire really well. If you're not going to balance this yin yang or these kind of energies, it can really cause some problems, okay? So as an example, if you become yang dominant, which is sort of like more the fire, more the going out there and doing things. So yang is an expansion of energy, or expender of energy, I should say. So yang is an expender of energy. So if you just keep expending energy, then essentially you're going to go bankrupt in terms of energy reserves. Okay. So, and then yin is an accumulation of energy. So essentially in our health, if we want really good health, you've actually got to modulate between your yin and your yang. So you're kind of going through energy accumulation and energy expenditure. So we'll start by Dr. Quiet. So Dr. Quiet would include things like adequate sleep. So, you know, for adults, the recommendation is 7 to 9 hours. So that's something that I do agree with the government on. The research is actually pretty good on that. So 7 to 9 hours, and ideally in line with the sun-moon cycle, where you're essentially sleeping when the moon's out. Dr. Quiet can also include introspection. Okay, so that might be things like, you know, going for a walk by yourself, or just having that kind of introspection where you can really go into yourself and really learn more about what you want. And it's also things around like meditation. So it doesn't have to just be sleep. It's just about, hey, having some of that quiet time so you can almost rebuild your energy reserves. Then the next one is Dr. Diet. So this is in the aspect of both nutrition and hydration. With hydration, Sue Field has given me permission to use as an example at the start of this seminar, so I will. So Sue Field conducted a gut health test where her bacteria was quite low, and we identified that she was drinking tap water. So tap water is loaded with chlorine, which actually kills off bacteria. So, you know, that's an adjustment that I've personally recommended to her. So low bacteria, I have seen it before where people drink tap water and they just got low bacteria in their gut. So I actually probably understand why the government puts chlorine in the tap water. It does kill off all the bad bacteria, but then I think it's personally worth using a filter to filter out the chlorine. Okay, so, you know, filtered water, adequate water, and I have done seminars before where I've spoke about how much water, but essentially if you want to go a really quick calculation, it's around about 30 mils times your body weight. So, you know, if you're 100 kilograms, you times by 30 mils, it's around about 3 liters. So that's adequate hydration. That can fluctuate for seasons. That can also fluctuate, you know, with activity levels as well. Cool. So filtered water, adequate water. There are other hydration options that are really good. Things like, I think coconut water is excellent. I think herbal teas are good. I think bone broths are excellent. Even freshly squeezed juices can be excellent. You know, there's some suspicion that they might lead to weight gain and so forth, but, you know, the research on it's pretty good. That said, it's very individual. You know, nutrition is very individual. I've worked with vegans or vegetarians that have had pretty good iron levels. And I've also worked with vegans, vegetarians that haven't had good iron levels, you know, so it's a very individual thing. You know, I've worked with carnivores. I've worked with people that have flourished on a ketogenic diet. You know, even though there's some research now showing that it may cause a little bit of damage to the liver, but it doesn't actually really matter. It's like literally whatever suits you. And so then it's like, well, what suits you? So in my view, it's whatever gives you good energy, whatever gives you good levels of satiety. So where you can last from meal to meal really well, you're not hungry, okay? It's things that work with your digestion. So, you know, if you're not too gassy, if you're not getting any kind of bloating. So they're indications that they're the right foods for you, okay? So in terms of whole foods, you know, things like fruit, veg, animal food, rice suits some people, legumes suit some people, nuts and seeds suit some people. You know, you just got to do the whole foods that suit you best. And it can be based on your genetics. It can be based on your level of activity. So if you're doing a lot of strength training, you might lean more towards protein. If you're doing more cardio training, you might lean more towards carbohydrates. So it's whatever works for you. I know, like for me personally, I love fruit, but I can't have too much because it plays up on my digestive system. Work pretty well with animal food. So it's whatever works for you. So look, in terms of, I'd be interested in everyone's opinion. What kind of foods do you think suit you? And just kind of try and think of a food group. Okay. So would it be
Maybe we can get people to write in the chat quickly so we have a
right
bit
in
of
the chat?
engagement.
Yeah, right in the chat. So would it be animal food? Would it be vegetables? Would it be fruit? Would it be nuts? Would it be seeds? Would it be rice? And we're talking whole foods, so legumes. And what you'll see is, and I'll look through the chat, is that everyone's got something different.
And I love what you said, Mark, because often I see people are trying to listen to someone who said, oh, this is the way. And I think there's a lot of different roads to the same destination. And like you said, it's so important to listen to your body and go with that, not with what someone said, because what's right for someone is not going to be right for someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll wait for everyone to type some stuff, and I'll probably add a point to what you said, Anya.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So as you can see, everyone sort of starts to write different things.
Mark, just got a question in the room.
Yeah.
What sort of milks out of those alternate milks would you recommend that are good? We've got our, all our different nut milks, and, would you recommend any of those, or would you diversify in those? So this is a question from Helen.
Yeah, good question. It's a common one that I get. So, controversially, I probably think unpasteurized dairy is the best, even though it doesn't suit me personally, doesn't suit some other people. But ignoring that, if you want to go with plant-based, I would say activated milks. So you want to go with activated, okay? So there's activated almond milk, there's activated cashew milk, the last time I checked. And there's a brand called Nutty Bruce that does that, and they sell in Woolworths. So what is activated? What actually happens is they soak the nuts and seeds in water overnight, which actually breaks down the environmental barrier called phytic acid, and then they put it in the milk. So I would look for activated plant-based milks. Nutty Bruce is probably the best national brand. And then outside of that, you could also trial a coconut milk. I personally don't recommend soy milk. Just there's too much research that it may throw around the hormones a little bit. And then I personally don't recommend oat milk unless it's been soaked overnight and it's activated. So oat milk again is quite high in that phytic acid, that environmental barrier. So that's just my recommendation. Do what suits you best as well. But activated milks, coconut milk, or if you wanted to be a rebel, you could look at raw milk.
Yeah, I love that one that you got me onto, the activated almond one.
Oh yeah,
it's really
sure.
Sure, and I think for some people, they would say that, if you have too much of it, something, so maybe find 2 or 3 alternatives to rotate. So maybe then the body doesn't get, too much of something.
Yeah, certainly I think rotation is excellent for anything. So, if you just ate chicken all day, every day, there's a couple of things that can happen. Firstly, you're only getting a certain spectrum of nutrients. Okay. You're not getting a variety of nutrients. Secondly, I've seen it many times in food sensitivity tests where people, as an example, love eggs, and then they come in sensitive to eggs on their test. So what can actually happen is the digestive system can actually get almost fatigued of digesting the same thing. And then all of a sudden can start to develop an immune reaction to it. So variety is awesome. If you can do variety, it's awesome.
Alison said, have you heard of the tiger nut milk? I haven't heard of that.
I have, but I can't actually quite recall what it is. Yeah, you might have to explain it more. Thanks, Alison.
Their tiger nuts are grown in Nigeria. They don't use a lot of water. They're sustainably grown and harvested, and there's a company in Victoria who started to buy all these tiger nuts made by women in Nigeria and are making a milk as an alternative to almond milk because it's more environmentally friendly.
Okay, cool. Okay, sure. Yeah, so with all nuts, they've got an environmental barrier around them. So that's why I recommend activated. So, not to say that you can't have tiger nut milk if that's what you like, and if it's with your morals, that's awesome. But that's just my current recommendation. The carrageenans, yeah. So I do agree. Some of them do have that. So ideally, you want to look for a nut milk that is just, almonds, sea salt, like activated almonds, sea salt, water, as an example. Like that's what you want to go with. So hopefully that answers that question. Cool. Awesome. So that's on diet, and it was really good. I actually love asking this question in a group call because I just love seeing all the different answers. Because you can just really see how different everyone is. So as I look through, Alison says the legumes mess me up. They mess me up as well, Alison, just to let you know. But there's some things here that, everyone's so different, which is fantastic. Cool. Okay. So that's your yin. Okay. So that's the accumulation, and we're working on polarities today. So, in the Vesica-Piscis model. We now work with the yang, okay? So this is like the expenditure of energy, and these two, Dr. Movement, Dr. Happiness, kind of interlinked quite a lot, okay? So Dr. Movement, the obvious one would be exercise. So, that's an energy expenditure. But Dr. Movement can also include things like work. It can also include things like working on your purpose. It can also include things like growth, okay? So, those kind of things do require energy, and you need to have enough energy to do that. And then we work with Dr. Happiness. So this isn't necessarily short-term happiness. So I personally think constantly seeking short-term happiness, can lead to addictive behavior. So we're talking about elongated happiness here. Okay. So things that will bring you happiness over the long term and satisfaction over the long term. So things like, learning, things like creativity. And like I said, these two can be interlinked quite a lot between happiness and movement. So essentially balancing these four energies can be really, really helpful in getting good health.
That's really cool.
Cool.
Thanks for sharing this, Mark.
I'm just going to click something. Okay. So within the academy, we learn 6 areas of life, and I actually really love this model. I've tried to think of other areas and I can't, so I think it's basically covered. So what I want to do with the group, for anyone that's joining, is I'd like you to pick somewhere where you think you really do well. So where you really own your value, and you can write it down. You can just think about it. Where do you really, really do well?
Maybe type it in, guys, so we can see what you have.
Just type it in if you feel comfortable with that. Out of these 6 areas, where do you think you do really well? And this is like things around where you hold your value, where you hold good boundaries, where you just don't take no for an answer. Where do you go really, really well?
It's like where you have good results, good outcomes, where your karma is a bit higher, when things just work out easier.
So for me, it'd be health.
What's yours?
Loving my son.
So family.
Yeah.
Zorica.
Health, cool. Okay, so we got a few there. I'll wait. Awesome. Hard to choose. Okay. Thanks, Monique. It is hard to choose. Okay. So now I'd actually like people to pick an area where they really struggle. Okay. So I know this is a health talk, but you don't need to pick health. it's somewhere where you struggle. So I'll write mine. Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. So what I'd like everyone to do is just get comfortable and close your eyes, please, and just take some deep breaths. And I'd just like you to really feel the energy and engage with where you really flourish. I want you to think and feel all the characteristics that you bring to that area, the boundaries, how well you hold your value, how disciplined you are, how persistent you are, how resilient you are. Just really thinking about all the characteristics in the area of life where you really flourish. And now I just want you to really feel you using these characteristics in an area that you struggle. So using that resilience, using those boundaries, using that value, and applying them to the areas where you really struggle. And just think about one or two things you can do differently. It may be a conversation. It may be owning your value more. It may be reaching out for support, whatever it is. Okay, just open your eyes when you're ready. Okay, awesome.
That was really, really good.
Awesome. So, are there any questions at all?
Let us know if you have any questions on anything that we talked about. I have one question before people come up with some questions, Mark. So you know how at the beginning you said first few points will be maybe they might bring some anger and we need anger to change. What do you think about, I notice a lot, that one thing is in health that we can lie to ourselves a lot of the time, that we're ahead of where we really are. And, and then before we get to see that, maybe I'm not eating as well as I thought, or maybe I'm, so do you believe that, in order to change and or maybe step into that responsibility side, like you've mentioned, you feel like we need to deal with our own shame that, of how we feel that we maybe are not making the best decisions? You know how they get Alcoholics Anonymous to actually say, hey, my name is, I don't know, John, and I'm an alcoholic. So they actually admit that they have a problem before they change. Because one thing I notice is a lot of the times is that, people would, and it's, just anyone, they would say, oh yeah, I'm doing this and it's not that bad. But actually then when we start to talk and debrief and go deeper, it's like, oh, well, it's not really good either. Does that make sense? So do you find that people often might not be very clear with themselves that, hey, my health is actually not good? Because I notice that people tend to walk more away from pain. Does that make sense? Oh, until I get sick, they don't do anything, and we try to get away with as long as we can before we start changing, until we get a why, and a why can be pain, or I really want to be fit and I want to feel good. Does that make sense? So a why can be negative, moving away from pain, or a positive one, moving towards pleasure. So what do you find, in that, and what makes people turn around and go, enough's enough?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what I find people is they'll change either through pain or self-awareness. They'll catch it early. So to reach out and change things through self-awareness is probably the most difficult path. And I know a lot of people here would probably be able to do that. But, well, the majority of people I deal with have normally hit a pain point, whatever that might be, whatever that might be. And then that's what they require to change. So yeah, it's normally one of those two things. It's normally pain or through self-awareness.
Yeah. And that's one thing I noticed. I think, I used to run away from possible pain, and let's say I just don't want to be like, my family, because, my family, I've got overweight. So I was like, I don't want to be like that. And then eventually turned into, oh, I actually love how I feel when I look after myself, because I was always swinging up and down as a size 8 to size 12. And for me, that was the pain point. That was my, we all have different tolerance of pain. For me, was like, the size 12 was the top. And then I went, oh, I can't go above that. Whereas some other people just allow themselves more pain. But and then when I was doing good, I remember the good feeling, oh, I'm proud of my decisions. I trust myself. I felt, oh, that feels good. And then I started to slowly get a different why. Oh, I want to do this because I love how I feel. It gives me the freedom of choice. So when I go to the shop and I can wear whatever, not, oh, I need to hide. So, I think that can change as well. Yeah. Going from pain and then slowly, as we allow ourselves to sit in pleasure, to get enough to go, oh, I just love how I feel. And then we can slowly walk towards it. So we don't have to hit a benchmark when we go, oh, now I'm going to bounce back. Because I see a lot of people are swinging, like I said,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to just be measuring the weight. It could be just, like feeling really good and then losing the balance again,
Yeah. Awesome.
So who wants to, you can open the mic and tell us, oh, there we go. Robert said, are there tangible benefits of fasting, only taking water around 24 to 48 hours?
Yeah, okay, cool. So the fasting question, there are reported benefits and side effects. So what I recommend to people with fasting, first of all, it's very individual. Okay, so I'll drive that in. Secondly, if you are fasting, what I recommend people do is actually just check their heart rate. You check your pulse rate, okay, while you're eating. Okay, so check your pulse rate while you're eating. And then when you're fasting, if the pulse rate starts to elevate, I would recommend some belly breath to bring down the pulse rate, because fasting is actually a detoxification tool. It's a healing tool. And if your heart rate is elevating, you are then going to go into fight or flight, and you're not going to get the detoxification benefits. So fasting has been linked with increasing cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone. So if you're going to do it, you've got to do it ideally keeping your heart rate in check or your stress hormones pretty low. And that's the cheapest way to do it, is just checking your pulse rate. So there are benefits. You've mentioned 24 to 48 hours. Okay, cool. So with 24 to 48 hours, there's things around, you can go into ketosis. There's autophagy, so cleaning out of the cells. There's a spike in human growth hormone. But again, the spike in human growth hormone only happens when the cortisol levels haven't actually fluctuated too much. So if you're going to do fasting, ideally, keeping a pretty level head. So hopefully that helps the question. In terms of weight loss benefits in fasting, I would personally say that's mixed. I'm not a big proponent of calorie restrictions. So, if you go and look back at the Biggest Loser contestants, they've actually all put on their weight back on, and their hormonal markers are worse. So, calorie restrictions or prolonged calorie restriction can lead to like wreaking havoc in the hormones.
But Mark, let's say when I do fasting, I'm not a fan of it because I get very dizzy and I feel like I'm going to faint. Do you think that because sugar goes down, or like if someone's like me, I tend to not like it for that reason, because I'm always dizzy. Like after like half a day, if I'm not eating, I need the food. I'm very good at what I'm eating, and I don't need to eat too much, but then I would definitely feel dizzy, and feeling like I'm going to faint.
Yeah, that's where it's individual. So yeah, it may not suit you that well. Anya, in terms of your character type, you're a go sort of personality. So, you're always going to be firing. So, fasting may not actually work for you. You may actually be engaging in that sort of fight or flight throughout the day quite a bit. And then fasting would potentially even elevate that. So, it's a little bit more for, you want to stay pretty calm throughout the day, pretty level-headed throughout the day. So yeah, it just may not suit you. That's all. It may not suit your constitution.
So if someone's like me, maybe not for you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Cool. So Jason said suits me. I personally fast about once every 3 weeks. That's what suits me. I've done it more often than that and felt a bit weak. So that's what I do. And I normally get some good detoxification benefits without sort of explaining the detail around that, because you wouldn't want to hear it. Cool. Okay. Grounding sheets. Recommend to unplug them, not the bought one that you reckon thanks for not having using it for a while. Okay, cool. So do you recommend to unplug them? Yeah, so in terms of unplugging them in use, if it helps them last longer, I've used grounding sheets for years. The plugging or unplugging doesn't really matter, in my opinion. Now, this is a tricky one. I was actually bought spare grounding sheets to lend to clients that would use them and generally report good benefits, which was great. In the last 6 months, I've had 3 people tell me that they're getting hot using the grounding sheets, and I think that's worth noting. So I'm currently doing a deep dive on that. I think it's the wiring of the house or some houses, and it may be picking up some residual electricity. So if it's making you hot, then I probably wouldn't recommend it. That said, the alternative to that is you can actually put the cord in the ground. So some of the grounding companies actually have a 30-meter cord, and you can put it in the ground. So I appreciate that's a pain, but that would mitigate, any kind of hotness someone might get. Like I said, I know probably about 20 or 30 people that have used them. They reported benefits. I've had 3 people that have said they've gotten hot. So they seem to work for most people. I've used them for years, and some of my clients use them as well. So most people say they're good, but you got to do what works for you as well. Like we said about lying, so he's okay. Thanks, Alison. Macabata, collagen, and tissue salts. I actually don't know what tissue salts are. I know what Celtic sea salt is and Redmond sea salt. So I'll talk to maca powder. So maca powder is like a hormonal balancer. As far as I'm aware, it's pretty good. Collagen supplement, again, like that's been shown to improve the health of the hair and the skin. Some of the powders people digest pretty well, some don't. If you struggle with digesting powders, sometimes a powder with enzymes in it can actually help the digestion quite a lot more, because our gut has naturally enzymes, and powders don't tend to have enzymes which help us digest food. So I would personally recommend an animal-based collagen supplement if you're that way inclined, or just using food. So I personally think animal food's the best source, including bone broth. So if you're going to go to a collagen supplement, just get a really good one. So like a marine one or a beef one. Some of the beef ones actually, unfortunately, use just the hoofs upon some of my research. So marine might be a little bit safer at the moment. Cool. Good questions. I love those questions.
Yeah, I love there's such a variety of what.
Yeah, I love those questions.
Any more questions, guys? Got 5 more minutes or 4 more minutes. Or you can quickly, otherwise, maybe write in the chat what was your golden nugget, or what's something that you really want to, focus on from what you've heard today that can help you change in your health. Robert said, are there any benefits of using Celtic salt water
100%.
as...
I'm pretty passionate about that one, to be honest. So the sports drinks have around about 4 minerals in them. And the ingredients in the sports drinks have actually changed over time. So if you look at ingredients sort of in the 80s and the 90s, it was just, I can't quite remember, but it's just like some electrolytes, some water, some juice. Now it's like as synthetic as you get. And so, for example, there's Powerade, which has ion 4. So that's 4 minerals, okay? Celtic sea salt has about 70 minerals. It's miles better, miles better. And if you want the sugar component, you can actually just squeeze a bit of lemon in there, or sorry, a bit of orange in there, and then you've got a much better sports drink, in my opinion.
Yeah, we have it at home and it's really good. We got it in the allergy center in Jemison, or Go Vita would sell them.
Okay.
They're really good.
So yeah, pinching Celtic sea salt in the water would be much, much better. I'm just trying to catch up on some. Love the $4. Thanks, Kayla. Great. Robert, energy drinks. you know, whether they're sugar-free or not, I don't think they're great for the hormonal system. The sugar-free ones have been shown to, like it's got something in there called aspartame, which has been linked with depression and anxiety. So I don't think they're great either. Focus on why you may also love the 4 doctors. Thanks, Elsa. What's the difference between health and weight? What's the difference between health and weight? Oh, good question. I don't know how to. Can you clarify a bit, Jace?
I think a lot of the times people associate health is the weight problem, maybe, but health in
Yeah,
the
okay, sure. Yeah, look, okay, I kind of get it now. Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a real tricky one. I've met people that, you know, I guess you could consider, you know, that might be have a BMI where they're considered overweight or obese, but they're still pretty healthy. They don't actually have any other health conditions. And then you've got to think, you know, the BMI measurement is also doesn't take into account muscle mass either. So, yeah, it's certainly the research shows that, you know, if you're carrying excess weight, you may be more susceptible to something called comorbidities. But I have met some people that you know, seem to have pretty good health as well.
That's a good answer.
Let me just try and catch up here.
Robert, I can send you the picture of the one that we have at home. That's a really good one. And it's from the organic, like I said, allergy center shop.
What goes in the middle of improving your health diagram? In terms of it's the balance of responsibility and blame, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, I think so.
Sugar. So sugar, good question, Monique. So there's a number of things. So this is processed sugar. I personally think sugar from fruit is fine, but again, very individual. Okay, so me personally, I can only handle probably 1 or 2 a day. But processed sugar is basically processed from canes, and because it's really processed, when you digest it, it actually leaches a lot of minerals from different areas of your body, including your bones. So processed sugar, first of all, can weaken your bones and weaken your muscles. It actually needs the minerals to help process it because it's processed food. There's a lot of other things around it. Feeds bad gut bacteria. Now, if you start feeding bad gut bacteria, that opens you up to basically everything. Okay, so there's something called neuroinflammation, so that can actually affect your mental health. Gut bacteria, different gut bacteria has been linked with autoimmune conditions. Yeah, and you know, obviously it can lead to different body shape as well. So you know, processed sugar is not great. What I recommend to people is, first of all, you may need to do the mental emotional work around it. Secondly, fruit, honey, and maple syrup are great sweet alternatives. Cool. Good questions, guys. I'm conscious that I think there's another academy call soon, isn't there? So
yeah, so we'll probably have to wrap up. So thanks for the questions. Thanks for your comments, guys. Thank you, Mark, for participating and preparing such a great information to share. Very grateful for that. I'm sure everyone got so much value from it. I really enjoy doing this with you tonight. So thank you so much for saying yes to it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for joining, everyone. Thanks for inviting me on here, and really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and yeah, have a good evening.